From 1971 to 2021, the United States has killed 38 million people through economic sanctions alone. Now, that's not including war, drone strikes, genocides, bombing campaigns, or anything else. 38 million people murdered through sanctions alone. Now, sit with that for a second, because it's the kind of number that should make your stomach turn. The level of death and suffering this country has inflicted across the Middle East and Africa is so extreme that most people don't even know how to process it. So they just don't. They hear the word sanctions and think it's some kind of diplomatic pressure, something clean, something controlled, when in reality, it's a system that cuts entire populations off from food, medicine, fuel, and the ability to survive. The consequence of sanctions is mass starvation and immense suffering. Iran has been living under this for nearly 50 years. Cuba for over 60. Sudan spent decades under sanctions and is now sitting in one of the worst hunger crises on earth. In Yemen, 4 out of every 5 people are living in poverty. And yet, we're still pretending this is about policy. Our government is murdering people, mainly children and the elderly, at scale all over the world, and they're calling it strategy. They're deliberately making innocent people suffer in order to pressure them into rising up against their own governments, as if starving a population is some kind of moral or effective path to political change. Over 50% of these deaths were children under 5 years old. And it doesn't even work. This strategy has failed over and over again. The people in power stay in power, and the civilians take the hit every single time, paying the price for decisions they had no part in making. So what's the justification for continuing it? Because at a certain point, you can't keep calling something a failed strategy when it produces the same outcome over and over across decades and across countries. If millions of people are dying, entire populations are being pushed into starvation, and it changes nothing politically, it's no longer a failure. It's their intention. Our government has killed 38 million people. Say it again, because most people can't even grasp a number like that. 38 million. For perspective, it's estimated that around 6 million people died in the so-called global war on terror. That number alone defined an entire era. Now multiply that several times over. Now, we're not talking about isolated incidences or unfortunate collateral damage. We're talking about tens of millions of innocent human beings who never posed a threat to anyone, who were starved to death over policies they had absolutely no control over. And somehow, we still talk about the people responsible for this like they're just normal, as if they're just politicians doing their job. Like this is all part of some complicated system we're not supposed to question too deeply. At what point do we stop pretending they're just politicians and call them what they are? Psychopath terrorists. Think about it. There is no serial killer in history who has come anywhere close to numbers like this. Not even remotely close. And yet people will bend over backwards to defend presidents and congressmen, argue endlessly over elections, and convince themselves that swapping one name for another is going to fundamentally change anything. How many times have you heard somebody say, if only we could just impeach Trump, things would get better? No, they've been murdering innocent people for decades, no matter whether there's a Republican or a Democrat in office. And the outcome never changes for the people on the receiving end of it. The suffering continues, the policies continue, and the excuses just rotate with the news cycle, while the average American finds ways to say something positive about Trump, Obama, Bush, or Biden, like we're talking about ordinary people instead of mass murderers that have the blood of millions on their hands. Does anyone have anything positive to say about Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, or BTK? Oh, what about mass shooters? Of course not, because nobody feels the need to sit around and debate their legacy or weigh their pros and cons, like there's some kind of upside to what they did. Now imagine for a second talking about a serial killer the way people casually talk about politicians. Well, yeah, he killed millions of people, but the other guy might be worse. He's just the lesser of two evils, you know? Sure, he killed some people, but, he might lower my taxes. It sounds insane when you say it out loud. And yet, that's exactly how people talk. For a clear picture of what this looks like in real time, the US government is directly engaged in collective punishment of the population of Cuba at this very moment. Now keep in mind, collective punishment of civilians is a war crime, and yet the US has cut off oil shipments to Cuba, and it's had deadly consequences. More than 90% of Cuba's electricity is dependent on oil-based fuel, and hospitals have been hit especially hard as blackouts have worsened. The New York Times has interviewed doctors there and reported last week that rapidly deteriorating conditions at hospitals and clinics across Cuba was causing deaths that would otherwise be preventable. Fuel shortages are keeping doctors and nurses away from work, and hospitals are canceling surgeries and delaying vaccines for children and life-saving treatments such as kidney dialysis and radiation therapy. This blockade is illegal, and using economic policy to make people suffer is immoral. The U.S. is trying to strong-arm Cuba while completely ignoring any sense of sovereignty or fairness. They're also threatening the rest of the world with sanctions just for trading with Cuba, which is a total violation of international rules and basic human rights. No country should have the power to starve out another nation. We have to stop acting like these are just politicians. They are not normal human beings. Personally, I would be on the verge of suicide if I was involved in the death of a child. Actually, let me take that further. If I was involved in the death of even an animal, a puppy, even a cat, which I'm not that fond of cats, but if I was involved in the death of a cat, let alone the deaths of millions of children, I would literally be on the verge of suicide. Yet the politicians in the US government sleep fine at night, knowing they're murdering innocent people. They are overseeing policies that result in people dying at scale across entire regions of the world, and there is nothing normal or defensible about that. So if you're tired of being told everything is fine while it clearly isn't, you're exactly why my publication exists. My work is 100% reader supported, so that means no advertisers, no political handlers, and no incentive to soften the truth. I started this because too many people feel like they're losing their minds trying to make sense of what's happening in the world, myself included. So I wanted to build a space of like-minded people to help make this journey feel less lonely for all of us. So if you're finding this video on YouTube, please share it with a friend to help spread the message. Americans need to understand the gravity of what their government is doing to innocent people all around the world. And to allow me to continue posting content just like this, please consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack. I'm currently running a special for $40 a year or $5 a month. If that price feels impossible to you, I completely understand. Just share this video with everyone you know. It costs nothing, but it matters more than you could ever possibly know. And if you prefer to make a one-time donation in support of my work, you can do so by visiting the link below the video.